Welcome to the City Current Show, powered by Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. Our mission at City Current is to power the good, and we do that through positive media, events, and philanthropy. This show features interviews with a mix of business and community leaders who discuss important efforts, trends, lessons learned, and ways to get involved so we can learn more about our community and work together to make a difference. Now, on to the show.
That's why we're honored to be talking about Soles for Souls. We have with us Nancy Youssef, Chief Business Development Officer and Executive Vice President International with Soles for Souls. How are you doing, Nancy?
So great. How are you, Jeremy?
Doing well. When you talk about the power of shoes and clothing and making a difference, very important conversation tied to Soles for Souls and all the good you do. So let's start with a little bit of history. Give us some background for Soles for Souls.
Super. Well, thank you, Jeremy, for having me on. I'm so grateful. And to share a little bit about Soles for Souls. So the history started in 2006 and really started as a way to galvanize the footwear industry in support of two major events that happened. One was tsunamis in Southeast Asia. So a lot of manufacturing of footwear is happening there. And so the industry came together and said, okay, how do we help? How do we help the people that are making everything that we're wearing? And the other shortly after was Hurricane Katrina here in the US. And so we looked at how do we help these folks again? So it really was born out of a need to help in relief efforts in a time of crisis. And that has been historically the backbone of Soles for Souls. It's since evolved over the last, 18 years, 19 years now, into not just how do we support in relief efforts, so major disasters or man-made situations, but also how do we create opportunities for people and taking these shoes and clothes that would otherwise be discarded. We've created a program that we're calling For Opportunity, and that is where we're taking these clothes, these shoes that are used that you and I would clean out of our closets and putting them into programs in which entrepreneurs can resell that product into their own marketplaces, typically in countries like Honduras, like Haiti, Guatemala. We've just launched in the Philippines. And so it's where it's really places of dire need, mostly remote, so not in the main areas. And we're helping to get them that product. They're then cleaning it up, refurbing it, extending its life, but also creating economic opportunity for themselves.
We're talking a lot of shoes, a lot of items when you look at the stats. So give us a couple of, those stats when you talk about the scope of everything you're doing with Soles for Souls.
Absolutely. So in 2024, and the numbers are hot off the press, so nearly 5 million pairs of shoes and about 3.5 million pieces of clothing and accessories. So, altogether, 10 million going into both For Opportunity and For Relief. So pretty significant numbers that we're moving around all across the globe and here in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, you're in the logistics business for sure.
100%. Nobody likes when I say that internally, but we really are a logistics organization. No question about that. Trying to move small
community catalyst, you're philanthropic, you're, social enterprise too. Like you're all these things, but at the same time, it's a lot of business logistics because especially when we talk about like globally being able to do all that you do, that is a big piece of the equation. And so let's go ahead and dive in because as you're alluding to, a lot of programs and a lot of evolution leading to these opportunities. And so go ahead and start with when you talk about working with the kids and the schools, that's a very unique one. Let's start there.
Yeah, that one was really born out of, and it's only 5 years old. So it's called For Every Kid. And that was really born out of conversations. We work with over 2,000 nonprofits across the US and the globe. Here in the United States, and specifically in Nashville, Tennessee, we had a conversation with our partners at Second Harvest Food Bank. And we kept asking, what's the greatest need outside of food, shelter, and water? We recognize that we are not primary need. This is, secondary. And the answer kept coming up, new athletic shoes. And why? And for kids in particular. And we kept asking, well, why? What's driving that? And it is to be able to get to school, to participate in the sports activities. But for those older kids, to be able to get a job and help support their families. And so if they don't have these closed-toed shoes on their feet, they can't participate or do any of those activities. And so, we sat there and it was a light bulb moment. We're like, well, we could help with that clearly, very easily. And we hyper focused, especially on the student population that is unhoused or experiencing homelessness in the public school system. And so we work, there's a program called McKinney Vento. McKinney Vento houses a social worker in each school district to help support all the wraparound services for these students. And so we work in partnership with them. We have to date distributed, since those 5 years, nearly 500,000 pairs of shoes across the United States. It is the lowest income districts. It's also a bit of a hidden program because, you don't want to call out those students. You don't want them identified separately. We're very intentional about the product. It's new branded athletic shoes, but it's always a diverse group of shoes so that you're not singularly saying, okay, oh, yes, I identify those shoes. It's a mix. They're everything from, the hottest Nike Air Jordans all the way to, the latest Converse or whatever it may be. So it's pretty amazing. We work in that program in two ways. So we get a lot of product donated, of course. However, athletic footwear is one of the hottest commodities right now. It's so hard to get it donated. So we're also purchasing, and it's really what was the catalyst for big fundraising efforts for us. We traditionally are product focused. This has driven us to be much more fundraising focused. And so this For Every Kid program, we have one big event. So in May, which we are calling the Race for Every Kid, it's a virtual challenge where you can come out, whether you do yoga, whether you run, walk, I don't run, so walk or whatever you do, ride your bike, anything that just is motion, you can trace that and you can raise funds for this amazing cause. And so we've got this race that goes on. It's a challenge in the month of May. That's our biggest fundraiser for that event. And then we collect all year long, of course. New athletic shoes, though. A lot of people, try to donate used product for this program. It's not. For the dignity of those kids, it's always new athletic shoes.
Going back to your roots, you also still do a lot of disaster relief and pouring in on that side. So talk about that side.
Absolutely. The relief efforts are really critical to what we do. Most recently here in the United States, we have had huge support around the LA wildfires. We continue to support that area. North Carolina and some of the areas affected recently by the hurricanes, Florida. We continue to do work there. It continues to go on. Sometimes it sort of fades out of the limelight of news, but the folks are still unsettled and still needing goods, and we're still in there. And so our work continues on way beyond when the actual moment happens. And in fact, we're usually much later responders because, again, the immediate need is shelter and food and water, and we're coming in much later to help support with those programs. But we do that domestically. We do it across the globe. So, in the last few years, we continue to support in the Ukraine-Russia wars, the conflicts and the earthquakes in Syria. So we are all over the globe, whatever that looks like. We have brand partners that are in certain locations. So Spain recently had massive earthquakes, and so we helped and supported out there as well. So all over the US, but all over the globe as well in our work in the relief efforts.
And then dive in a little deeper on kind of the social enterprise, the entrepreneur, the opportunity side, and then also to the conservation around this.
Yeah. The For Opportunity program, which is our entrepreneurs, is really amazing. In fact, I just got back from our first trip to the Philippines, where we've launched this program there. And it was incredible to watch. What happens with that program is we are able to provide the shoes and the clothing. They buy that product from us. We also work with another nonprofit called Street Business School that's based out of Denver. It actually creates a training program for these entrepreneurs in which they learn the skills of how do you buy and sell anything. It doesn't have to be shoes and clothes, anything. What does profit mean? What does marketing look like? How do you really, it's all the courses that you need to have a small business, right? Because essentially these folks are starting small businesses. And some of these folks go on to create thrift shops. They go on to have multiple areas in which they sell their product. And so it's pretty incredible to watch them take these training tools and then train other folks in this entrepreneurial program, sell the product. They'll start off with one bag full, like a garbage bag full of product. That in turn turns into three, a store, so on, right? And this whole chain effect and domino effect of how they're creating economic opportunity for themselves in their communities. And they're able to hire their own families, their own community members. They're bringing, and so, as I mentioned at the top of the call, some of these communities are really in the most rural communities. Some of them are just working to get running water in their villages, to get electricity in there, or basic healthcare, whatever that looks like. So it really does change the trajectory of some of these folks' lives. It's pretty incredible. And a small unknown is we actually do a little bit of that domestically in the United States. So we have partnerships with organizations like a Plato's Closet, in which, you go to take your stuff to sell and they say, hey, we don't really accept this, but you can donate it. And so we have these bins outside of those facilities, and we hire entrepreneurs here that go and pick all of that up. And they're small business people that are wanting to do something. Could be a side gig, could be their full-time gig, but we're also creating that opportunity here in the US as well.
How can the community help and support Souls for Souls? You mentioned you have Race for Every Kid.
Yeah.
The fundraising is a critical piece, obviously, to support what you do. Talk about how we can help Souls for Souls.
Yeah, thank you for that. So a couple ways. One, product. We always need product. That's our baseline. That's our bread and butter. That's how we operate. And so if you can clean out your closet and donate your stuff, we take shoes, we take clothes, we take accessories. You can do that a couple of ways. One, we have a partnership with Zappos. So Zappos for Good. You go on their website, download a free shipping label. It's through UPS. Up to 50 pounds in each box, which is a lot of stuff. You can donate half your closet with that, and you ship it to us for free. No charge, no anything. Just put the label on and send it off to us. Or you can go on our website, soles4souls.org, and you can find our drop-off locator. So somewhere near you, a coffee shop, your fitness center, a store, a DSW store, famous footwear stores, etc. You can just go drop your stuff off there too. So product, do a shoe drive with one of your favorite organizations. If you have children or nieces or nephews, or you belong to a community group, we work with Rotary clubs, we work with Lions clubs, we work with Greek organizations. I mean, almost every organization you can imagine, one way or another, does shoe drives with us. And that's a really important way you can get involved, for sure.
Nancy, thank you for all you and your amazing team do to power the good. Thank you for coming on the show.
Jeremy, thank you. So great to be here with you.
Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services is proud to power the cityCURRENT Show. We're a people-first company that protects what matters most, the families, businesses, and trailblazers that keep our community going. As one of the nation's top independent insurance firms, Higginbotham is a single-source solution for business insurance, employee benefits, HR services, and personal insurance that's customized for you. We're here to serve you, the people you care about, and your community. Call 866-377-1959 or visit higginbotham.com.
Welcome back to the cityCURRENT Show, powered by Higginbotham. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference and powering the good. And that's why we're excited to be talking about Boundless Kids. We're honored to have with us Katherine Parker, founder of Boundless Kids, as well as Andy Bailey, CEO and founder of Boundless. How are you two doing?
Great. Jeremy, thanks for having us.
Fantastic, dude. Good to see you. Great jacket.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk about Boundless Kids and all the amazing things you're doing. And it also ties into Boundless. And so let's start with a little bit of history and where all this started. So Katherine, give us some background on Boundless Kids.
Absolutely. So Boundless Kids grew out of the work that we were doing inside of Boundless. And maybe I will let you jump in, give the backstory of that, and then can jump into Boundless Kids.
Yeah, after working with companies, I know your listeners are a lot of business people, working with companies for 20 years, one of the limitations, or one of the greatest limitations we always kept running into, were the individuals inside of those companies not growing themselves personally at a rate fast enough to scale the organization. So said another way, if a business is going to grow 20% a year, everybody in the business has to grow, whatever grow means to the individual, at 20% a year, or it gets into a state of chaos and overwhelm. And we just saw that repeatedly happen over and over and over and over. And ceiling after ceiling after ceiling. So we created all these tools and thought processes and ways to focus on the individual such that the individual in the business could grow themselves. We call it capacity, so grow capacity in order to keep up with the demand inside of the organization. And then ultimately, through a transaction, brought that content into its own under the umbrella of Boundless. So at Boundless, we work directly with adults. Typically, it's somebody that's in the business world. Many times it's couples. And then that grew into families. And I'll turn it back to Katherine to talk about the growth into the family side.
So when we started this, a lot of the adults that we worked with, said, hey, how do we get our kids involved in this? How do we teach our kids at a young age the habit of thinking for themselves? How do we teach them the habit of not just goal setting and plan creation, but goal achievement? And, as most parents know, mom or dad can say something to their kid 25 times and they never listen. But when, an aunt or an uncle or a cousin say it, it's like, oh, mom and dad, listen to what Uncle Jimmy said. It's the greatest thing ever. And mom and dad are like, I've been saying that to you, for the past 3 years. But so we just took it upon ourselves to say, well, let's test that out. Let's see what that looks like. And when we first started, our focus was really on working with kids from families that had the ability to pay for our services. And as we dug into this work, our core purpose is to reveal unrealized potential in the kids that we work with. And through that, we said, we need to take this content to underserved communities, to underprivileged kids. So teaching them the habit of goal achievement, teaching them, about what it means to have a growth mindset and how to overcome challenges, and also teach them, because a lot of kids most times don't feel like a lot of their life is within their control. They're just being told what to do all the time. And so being able to teach them that there are certainly things in our life that are outside of our control, but one thing that you can control is your achieving the goals that you set for yourself. And so that's a little bit of how it got started. And I've kind of dipped into some of the work that we do.
Yeah, but I think all this makes sense where you're working with adults and the abundant mindset, increasing capacity, their growth and development. And then as parents, you're like, I want my kids to experience this too. And then you start working with the youth and then you realize, wow, this needs to be a nonprofit to be able to reach more and be able to help more. And when you talk about mindset growth, taking ownership of your own life and career and opportunities, obviously very powerful at an early age to set forth this trajectory in life that can be boundless and limitless. And so talk about it from the process, because you do a lot. There's a structured program. And so there's online elements. So go ahead and dive into how the magic happens with Boundless Kids.
The majority of the work that we do is all online. And our system, we actually have a Boundless Kids journal that each kid will receive. And we meet with our kids 4 times a year on Zoom or Teams. And we do what we call our seasonal resets. So these are our goal setting calls. And each child is paired one-on-one with a Boundless Kids coach. So when a kid comes into our program, we assign them to a coach. This is the coach that they work with for the duration of the time that they're in our program. And one thing that is pretty interesting that we have found is, when we do these calls, it's 60 to 75 minutes, 4 times a year. And the more times than not, parents, it's rare that parents will sit down with their kid for 60, 75 minutes and only focus on, their kid that's in front of them. So we give those kids that space. In the first couple of calls we do, they're a little bit, like, why am I here? What am I doing? And then by the 3rd or 4th call, let me tell you everything that's going on in my life. Here's what's going on that's good, and here's what's going on that's really bad. But during those seasonal reset calls, one-on-one with the coach, the outcome is always that the child leaves with a set of seasonal goals for themselves, and then also a step-by-step plan that's pretty detailed in the things that they need to go and do to ultimately achieve that goal.
The concepts of that all grew out of business management stuff, right? So in business, we spend time creating goals and targets and KPIs and outcomes, and then we write plans to achieve them. And then directing that energy to the individual, saying you can do the same thing for what you want your life to look like individual, and then directing it to the kid. Katherine just took it upon herself to create the content to match kind of desired look, feel, and process for a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old versus some of the work that we were and we still do with adults and using the adult content.
Yeah, I think that's where the parallel is perfect, because it's like you look at all the things you're doing once again with the adults, and then matching this and making it, kid friendly, so to speak, but being able to then put it in words and phrases they would understand, but then, create the same systems that lead to success in adult life, doing it in youth, but giving them the structure that they can carry forward as they get older to be super successful too. So I think a lot of this is, awesome in terms of, okay, how do you make it easy? How do you make it digestible? But ultimately give them a tool to be really successful. Talk about then that mindset shift that starts to take place and how you get to see it with the abundant mindset, the possibilities. So by putting structure, by putting, these sort of conversations and having this one-on-one dialogue, talk about what you have a chance to see, unfold with just their growth mentally and what's possible.
We work with two different types of children. So again, going back to turning this into a nonprofit, we work on a buy one, give one model, essentially. So anytime a family has the ability to pay for their child to be in the program, it automatically scholarships a non-paying kid. So the goals that are set are very, very different, between each kid. We work with a kid who, when he came into the program, he was maybe 10, or around 10 years old. And he had this idea of opening up his own bakery. And he's adopted, and he and his mom really bonded over being in the kitchen together. And this started out as just a simple idea. And he's now 13 years old. He's been with us, for those going on 3.5 years. And he now has an actual cookie business. So he has a website, and he is, it's kind of funny. His mom told us not long ago, he came in from school and, said, "Mom, I've got to get this homework done. Then I have 3 orders of cookies that I have to, start baking and get out the door by, whatever day." But he's now learning the basics of, tracking revenue and, what are your expenses, like going to the store and keeping up with all of those things. So that's a pretty cool story. To start it out as an idea that he shared with his coach, and then 3.5 years later, he's actually got a business. Now, we also, again, going back to the goals are different, have kids that sometimes their goals are simply to, graduate high school or to get into the 9th grade. And then the coach that they work with, fully supports them in, again, what are the goals and what are the steps that we have to take in order to make that happen. Some of the kids that we work with, we actually do 6-week accountability calls with them. And that is nothing more than pulling up their goals, pulling up their plans, walking through the plans, and to say, I've gotten my first 3 steps done, but I haven't gotten the 4th one done. And then committing to what's next and what they'll do, and, from now until the next time that we speak, to get them either back on track with their goals or to keep them moving forward.
Obviously, Boundless Kids being, available really globally as an opportunity. Talk about how people can take the next steps. How can the community support your efforts? Obviously, being a nonprofit. So how can the community help and support your efforts?
One thing that we are really after is to make those local connections, because the majority of everything that we do is online. We work with kids we work with kids in Canada. We work with kids all across the United States. We actually have a partner in Indonesia, even, that it's a school, and they go into very, very remote parts of Indonesia pull these kids in to attend these schools, and we work with them as one of our partners. So ideally, I know Andy mentioned that we do a lot of traveling. We would like to get plugged into some of the community here, so that instead of us traveling and taking this content elsewhere, we can really begin to focus on making a big impact in our own backyard. So, ways that the community can help. So if anybody has access to another nonprofit or an organization that works with kids, whether these be schools, whether these be paying kids or non-paying kids, would love the opportunity to speak to some of those folks. They could reach out to either one of us, myself or Andy, and we can give them more information about that. But also, if anybody is looking for a place to do an off-site retreat, they can certainly use the Boundless Farm for that, whether that is for adults or, whether that's for kids.
I know you do some events too, but if there's an opportunity to speak from a stage to a group of people that need to hear a little bit of a message around mindset, that would be cool, because we do have that kind of in a box that we can deliver to a group of people and educate them a little bit, but also at the same time about what we're doing with kids.
Well, Katherine, Andy, thank you for all you do to power the good. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Jeremy.
Thank you for watching the City Current Show. To learn more about each of the guests, to share your stories of others, leading by example, or to watch past episodes and more media focused on good news, visit our website at citycurrent.com or follow along on social media using the handle or hashtag citycurrent. We look forward to seeing you again soon, and thank you for all you do to power the good.